Hello, I'm Natalie Bumgarner. I'm an associate professor in the plant sciences department at University of Tennessee, and I'm also an extension specialist working in the area of residential and consumer horticulture. So I am really glad to welcome you to our virtual field day. Now we're going to miss seeing you in person at the Organic Crops Unit, which is one of my favorite places on the UT campus, but we are excited that you're able to join us for this series of videos and that we have the opportunity to share with you the horticultural content that we were going to include in this year's field day. And so my topic is microgreens. And I kind of call this presentation Tiny, Tasty, Timely. And as we head into fall and winter, this is actually a topic that can work for really any home gardener, any apartment dweller, anybody who loves to work with plants has an opportunity to take advantage of all that microgreens has to offer. And so you might be asking, well, what exactly are microgreens? Well, simply, they are plants that we eat immature, right? So they're very small seedlings of common edible plants. And really the main criteria is that it is safe and pleasant to eat the shoot portion, right, of the vegetative tissue of these types of plants. And so it would be no surprise that a lot of the common microgreens that we use in our kitchens are plants that we also use in our gardens, many of them leafy crops. Cabbage, broccoli, arugula, kale, turnips are some of the cool season crops. Some of the other Asian greens like bok choy. We also have the opportunity to use a lot of the herbs, basil, cilantro, chives. All of these can be grown as microgreens. And the great thing about microgreens is they have a very short harvest window. So most of those crops can be grown between 10 and 21 days, right? So we have a really short crop cycle, which can be great for kind of small-scale gardeners, or if you're a novice chef and you want to include some new types of crops into your kitchen, microgreens can be a great opportunity. So I've kind of already mentioned some of the reasons why people grow microgreens, but they kind of fall into three main categories. One is that they're interesting as far as visually. There are a lot of colors and shapes and textures that can be included with microgreens when they're included, whether with a main dish or whether in a salad. They're also tasty, right? So there are some, of the more flavorful, shall we say, leafy greens like arugula that you might not want to eat as an entire salad, but it can be great as a garnish, as a microgreen used on a main dish or on a salad. And the third is their nutritional value. Sometimes these small, immature plants can actually have a higher nutrient density for some vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients versus their more mature vegetable counterparts. So that's a little bit about the what, immature plants, right? It's crucial, though, I should probably explain the difference between microgreens and sprouts. Microgreens, we just eat the shoot tissue. Sprouts, oftentimes the seed and roots are both consumed. Microgreens, we also have the opportunity to grow in a more greenhouse-like, right, conditions. And so they can be grown in a range of indoor or outdoor, partially environmentally controlled conditions, and that's what makes them very useful for home gardeners. If you have a protected porch, a very sunny indoor window, a sunroom, a small greenhouse, or if none of those fit your site, you can use supplemental light, and that can work well. A small fluorescent or LED fixture can work really well because microgreens are grown in very small growing areas, and so even just a couple of flats can provide you with a whole host of colors, shapes, textures, and flavors for your salads and main dishes in the kitchen. So that's a little bit of kind of the what and a little bit about the why. A lot of really some of my main goals to share with you through this course of videos is actually a little bit about the how. So I just kind of want to give you a few tips and tricks to kind of get you exploring, right? Get you experimenting with a few of the things that microgreens have to offer. So first, let's start with growing containers. And you can see I have an array of containers here. Most of them kind of fall in the category of what we would call traditional greenhouse seeding types of containers. This is a half flat. So it's a solid, well, it should have drainage on the bottom, but it can be used in a variety of locations, really typical for starting some transplants, early season vegetable or flower transplants. This is another example of a seedling tray, and this is a tray that actually has lots of small divisions in it, and so if you want to grow a lot of different types of crops and keep them separate, this can be a really good way to do it. This also has the opportunity to bottom water, and so this row of small cells right here is actually has holes on the bottom. You can sit that in a solid tray and actually water from the bottom. So those are some other useful reasons why we might use some of these more standard types of greenhouse seedling containers. Here's a little bit of a non-standard container that could work really well in a whole host of small-scale home conditions. This is a clean blueberry or raspberry container, and so you can see drainage on the bottom, a little top that we can even use to retain humidity while the seedlings are germinating. So there are a lot of different types of containers that you can use. The main criteria is that they're clean, able to be sterilized, they're not too deep. We really can go with only anywhere from a ½ inch to a couple inches of media. These do not need to be deep as long as we can keep them watered well, and they need to have drainage holes so that we don't oversaturate our media with moisture. So that's a little bit about the containers. When it comes to selecting the media that your microgreens are going to grow in, really my preference, especially for beginner microgreen growers, is actually a peat-based germination mix. And so that's what I have here. You can see very small bits of perlite, small peat moss, right? So this is a fine textured type of germination mix that will retain water well. We want it to drain, certainly, but we want it to retain water well so that we can do a good job of getting and keeping these seeds moist as they germinate. Because for a very short production cycle, it's important to provide very good germination conditions for our microgreens. You can see we're just about ready to seed actually here in this tray. I have the media really completely full. We want it to come almost up to the tops of the containers. It'll make it easier to harvest, and some of these, like basil for instance, have very short stems, so we want to fill our containers nearly up. I want them to be a little bit moist. Not wet by any means, but a little bit moist, and certainly not powder dry, because especially a peat moss can be a little bit harder to re-wet. So you have a clean, sterile container that works in our growing system. We have a media that is also pathogen-free, a little bit moist, evenly filling our containers. There are some plastic, there are some paper materials that you can use to grow your microgreens in, so I don't want to overlook those. But one of the main reasons that I like some of these peat-based germination mixes is because many of them also have a little bit of starter fertilizer in them. If you use some thick paper and things like that, then you're probably going to have to provide some soluble fertilizer. And for a couple-week crop, if you have a little bit of starter mix in there, then it's a nice, simple way to not have to spend a lot of extra time or any extra money providing fertilizer. So that's a little bit about your container. It's a little bit about the media. The next thing I wanted to talk about was, of course, the plants, right? So what are some of the most common crops that we would use? Well, as we think about this being fall and kind of heading into the cooler time of year, the first ones that probably would be at the top of my list to suggest to you would be cool season crops. And so there are a whole host of them, many in the brassica family. I already mentioned kale. It's a little bit slower growing, but you do have a whole host of color options for kale that can be cool, from the reds to the blues to the greens. Cabbage, of course, green. I like to grow red cabbage, so that's an option for beautiful colors. Of course, turnips and arugula are both really quick crops. These are actually turnips right here that were seeded less than 24 hours ago, and you can just start to see germination starting on these young seeds. So given the right condition, a lot of these brassica crops can be very quick. Mustard, broccoli are both good options. Mustard, of course, a little bit more flavorful. Broccoli, one of the milder crops. Bok choy is another really nice, mild Asian crop. A lot of the radishes are also grown. If you want more flavorful types of options, cress, and of course, arugula that I already mentioned. I'll talk about these kind of as single species, but also keep in mind that a lot of these cool season crops can be mixed together. And so there are a lot of great brassica mixes, a lot of these assorted species types of combinations that give you great variety in leaf shape, color, texture, flavor. So some of the mixes can also be a really good place to start for novice microgreens. The herbs are an option, right? So cilantro, chives, these are both going to be a little bit slower germinating, a little bit slower growing, so they'd be more on that 3-week end of the spectrum. We also have, of course, basil, which may be one of the most common microgreens grown. Red, green, a whole host of options. One of my other favorite warm season crops is amaranth, which you may think of as an undesirable weed, but it can be a beautiful crop, especially the red amaranth, which is one of my favorites to grow. There are a few other crops that we won't go into detail about in this short video. Sunflowers, peas, some of the various grain crops can all be grown and used as microgreens, but there are a little bit more nuances to their production. So a couple of final notes about seeds. You don't need to worry about cultivars. We're not growing these all the way to full maturity, so cultivars are really not that essential. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you buy things that are already packaged for microgreens, then you'll probably get a better deal than if you just bought field crops, smaller packages, more for the garden. And of course, the essentials. Make sure it's untreated, and you should be good to go as far as microgreen seeds.